The most magnetic person in any room is rarely the one shouting to be heard. She is not the one pacing the perimeter, adjusting her tone or her posture to mirror the expectations of the crowd. Watch her. She moves through the space with a quiet, unshakable certainty. While others scan the faces of their peers for a flicker of approval or a nod of validation, she remains anchored. She does not perform. She does not solicit feedback. She walks as if the ground beneath her belongs to her because she has reached a singular, radical conclusion. She has stopped asking the world for permission to exist. This is not a performance of indifference. It is a fundamental shift in gravity. She is the lighthouse, not the mirror. It is the quiet power of a woman who has reclaimed the remote control of her own life. We are conditioned from the very first years of our lives to view our worth as a currency. We learn early that approval is a commodity, something to be traded for likes, grades, or the fleeting validation of a partner. This is the foundation of the trap. You grow up believing that if you are loud enough, or accommodating enough, or successful enough, you will finally secure the acceptance you crave. But the math never balances. You spend your adulthood checking the temperature of every room before you speak. You analyze the tone of a text message for hidden meanings. You adjust your boundaries based on the fear that standing your ground will cost you a connection. This is a constant, low-level anxiety that hums in the background of every interaction. You are essentially handing the remote control of your life to everyone you meet, saying, "Tell me who I am, and I will be that person." It is a psychological feedback loop where your sense of self is tethered to the fluctuating opinions of others. But what happens when you stop trading? What happens when the need for external applause vanishes, replaced by a deep, internal silence? When you stop the transaction, the first thing you notice is the noise. It is the sudden absence of the applause you spent years chasing. For many, this silence feels like a void. The mind, trained to scan for external signals, panics. It searches for a reaction, a comment, or a validation that no longer arrives. You might feel a strange, hollow weight in your chest, a phantom limb of the self you used to perform. This is the withdrawal phase of seeking approval. Yet, if you stay in that silence, something shifts. The static clears. You realize the anxiety you felt was not yours. It was the noise of other people's expectations. In this quiet, you are no longer reacting to the room. You are observing it. You are not waiting for someone to define your value, because you are busy defining it yourself. This is not a cold or unreachable state. It is a psychological homecoming. You are no longer a mirror waiting for an image to reflect. You are an entity with its own gravity. The silence is not empty. It is full of your own thoughts, your own desires, and your own truth. You have stopped asking the world for permission to exist, and in that stillness, you finally find the space to actually live. To understand this shift, visualize two distinct objects. Most people move through life as a mirror. A mirror has no color of its own. It exists only to capture and return the images placed before it. If someone approaches you with anger, you reflect it. If they offer praise, you catch it and hold it up to feel whole. You are constantly shifting your surface to match the room, becoming whatever the observer needs you to be. But a mirror is fragile. Now, imagine a lighthouse. A lighthouse does not change its form based on the weather or the ships that pass by. It stands on a foundation of solid rock, and its light is generated entirely from within. It does not reflect the darkness. It cuts through it. When you become a lighthouse, you stop being a vessel for other people's projections. You define your own path. You are no longer waiting for the world to tell you who you are. You are showing the world exactly where you stand. Most of us live in a state of constant, low-level anxiety, checking the temperature of the room before we speak. It is a subtle, persistent hum of unease. You monitor your social media metrics, watching the numbers shift like a stock market ticker. You analyze the tone of a text message, dissecting the punctuation for hidden meanings or signs of cooling interest. You adjust your boundaries based on how much you fear losing someone, shrinking your own space to ensure theirs remains undisturbed. This is the validation trap. It is a psychological feedback loop where your sense of self is tethered to the fluctuating opinions of others. You are not living your own life. You are managing a performance. Every interaction becomes a calculation. We treat our worth as a currency, trading it away for the fleeting approval of strangers, colleagues, or partners. You are constantly scanning the horizon for a sign that you are enough, while the only person who can provide that answer is the one you are busy ignoring. When you seek validation, you are essentially handing the remote control of your life to someone else. Think about the mechanics of that surrender. You wake up, and instead of asking what you need, you scan the environment to see what is expected of you. You are saying to every person you encounter, "Tell me who I am, and I will be that person." You have become a character in a script you did not write. You wait for the applause to know if your performance was successful, and you wait for the silence to know if you have failed. The remote is in their hands. They decide when you are worthy, when you are interesting, and when you are enough. This is not a partnership. It is a total loss of sovereignty. You feel the weight of this loss in the quiet moments, the sudden, sharp realization that your own preferences have been buried under the needs of others. You look at your life and realize you are living a version of yourself that was curated for an audience of strangers. It is the moment the screen goes black, the applause stops, and you finally look down at your own hands, realizing the remote has been missing from your grip for far too long. Reclaiming the remote is not a grand gesture. It is a quiet, internal click. You stop looking for the external signal to validate your existence. You look at the screen of your life, and you realize the channel has been set by someone else for far too long. You reach out, you take the device, and you turn it off. The silence that follows is not empty. It is the sound of your own autonomy returning. You begin to understand that your value is not a variable that fluctuates with the mood of the room. It is a constant. It does not rise with praise, and it does not fall with criticism. When you stop treating your worth as something that needs to be earned, the power dynamic shifts instantly. You are no longer a mirror reflecting the desires of others. You are the source of your own definition. People may still offer their opinions, but those words no longer have the weight of law. They are just noise, passing through a space that you now own. You stand in the center of your own life, no longer adjusting your frequency to match the expectations of the crowd. You have finally become the architect of your own reality. The first trait of this internal shift is emotional self-validation. Observe how most people handle the onset of insecurity. They feel a tremor of doubt, and their immediate instinct is to reach out. They search for a partner to act as a mirror, hoping for a reflection that says they are worthy, safe, or enough. They treat their anxiety like a leak that must be plugged. The self-validated woman does not operate this way. When the familiar ache of doubt surfaces, she does not scramble to fill the void. She stops. She sits with the discomfort. She feels the tension in her chest and the racing thoughts, but she does not project them onto her environment. She does not demand that a partner soothe the storm she is experiencing. She treats her own emotions as valid data, not as problems that require an outside party to solve. She allows the feeling to exist. By refusing to outsource her emotional regulation, she stops the cycle of dependency. She learns to be the primary source of her own stability. When a trigger strikes, the untrained mind looks for a culprit. You blame the tone of a text, the silence of a friend, or the coldness of a room. You project your internal chaos onto the people around you, demanding they change to make you feel comfortable. The self-aware woman does the opposite. She treats the trigger as a signal, not a sentence. When that familiar spike of defensiveness rises, she pauses. She does not lash out, and she does not retreat in silence. She turns the lens inward. She asks herself, why does this specific moment sting? She traces the sensation back to its source, looking for the root of the insecurity rather than the surface-level offense. This is the discipline of the investigator. She examines her own reactions with the detachment of a scientist. She realizes that her discomfort is not an emergency caused by others, but a map leading to her own unhealed parts. Once you stop treating your emotions as problems to be solved by others, the entire landscape of your inner world changes. You stop viewing sadness, anger, or confusion as emergencies that require immediate external intervention. Instead, you begin to see these states as raw data. When a wave of frustration hits, you do not immediately look for someone to blame or someone to comfort you. You observe the sensation. You note the physical weight of it, the way it shifts your focus, and the underlying message it carries about your current needs. This is the foundation of self-trust. You are essentially telling yourself that you are capable of handling your own internal weather. You stop offloading your feelings onto friends or partners, which prevents the messy entanglement of emotional dependency. You hold the emotion, you examine its origin, and you decide what action, if any, is actually required. This process creates a profound sense of autonomy. You learn to rely on your own judgment, turning your inner life into a reliable compass rather than a chaotic storm. This internal stability manifests most clearly when you face direct criticism. Most people operate on a hair trigger, viewing any negative feedback as an assault on their character. They scramble to defend, to justify, or to counterattack, hoping to force the other person to retract their words. The self-validated woman does not play this game. When someone offers a critique, she does not immediately collapse in shame or surge with defensive heat. She stays still. She treats the words as an object placed on a table between them. She observes the criticism with clinical distance. She asks herself, is there a grain of truth here that I can use to grow? If the answer is yes, she takes the lesson and discards the judgment. If the answer is no, she lets the words pass like a cloud through an open window. She does not need to win the argument, because she does not need the other person to confirm her reality. She remains the anchor in the room, unswayed. This state of being is what we call quiet confidence. It is not a personality trait you cultivate to impress others. It is the total absence of the need to perform. Most people move through the world like actors on a stage, constantly checking their lines, adjusting their posture, and waiting for the applause of the audience. They are exhausted by the effort of maintaining an image. The self-validated woman has stepped off that stage. She does not need to be the loudest person in the room or the one who commands the most attention. She understands that true power does not shout. It simply exists. When you stop trying to convince others of your worth, you stop leaking energy into the void of external validation. You become still. This stillness is not a void. It is a presence. It is an unshakable poise that others can feel the moment you enter a space. You are no longer acting for an audience, so you have no script to defend. You are simply yourself. And in that simplicity, you find a freedom. Consider how you distribute your attention. Most people scatter their focus like seeds in a storm, hoping to catch a glimpse of approval from everyone they encounter. They monitor social media metrics, analyze the tone of a text, and adjust their presence based on the fear of losing someone. This is the validation trap. It is a constant, low-level anxiety that drains your battery before the day has even begun. The woman who is self-validated operates differently. She guards her focus with the precision of a sentinel. She does not offer her energy to those who lack the capacity to understand her. When she realizes an interaction is a performance rather than a connection, she simply withdraws. This is not an act of arrogance. It is a profound respect for her own time and internal resources. She understands that her attention is the most valuable currency she possesses. By refusing to spend it on people who do not value her, she preserves her clarity. She does not need to be understood by everyone. She only needs to be understood by herself. This selectivity is the ultimate signal of high self-regard. She is no longer a mirror reflecting the desires of others. She is a lighthouse, defining her own path. Setting boundaries is the final frontier of self-validation. For most, the word no is heavy, laden with the fear of disappointing others or being labeled difficult. You might feel a sharp, immediate spike of guilt when you decline a request, a lingering anxiety that you have somehow failed a social contract. But the self-validated woman has rewired this response. She recognizes that guilt is often just the echo of other people's unmet expectations. When she sets a boundary, she does not apologize for her existence or her choices. She understands that saying no to someone else is, in the most literal sense, saying yes to her own integrity. She does not need to justify her need for space, her preference for solitude, or her refusal to participate in dynamics that drain her spirit. This is not about being rigid. It is about being consistent. By choosing to honor her own needs over the comfort of others, she stops the cycle of resentment before it begins. She accepts that some people will leave her life when they realize they can no longer manipulate her worth. She lets them go. She chooses the quiet peace of her own truth over the noisy approval of those who never truly saw her. This is the radical act of choosing yourself. If these words strike a chord, it is because you are standing at a threshold. You have felt the weight of the old patterns, and you are beginning to recognize the shape of a life lived for yourself. This resonance is not just an intellectual agreement. It is a physical recognition. You might feel a strange, cold flutter in your chest when you consider the possibility of being truly, unapologetically yourself. This is the friction of change. It is the sound of your old self-concept cracking under the pressure of a new, more honest reality. You are realizing that the comfort of being understood by everyone was actually a cage. Now, you are stepping into the terrifying, exhilarating space of being understood only by the one person who matters, you. This transition is not meant to be easy. It is meant to be transformative. You are moving from a state of seeking permission to a state of claiming authority. When you stop looking for external signals to validate your worth, the world around you will begin to shift. Some people will pull away. Others will finally see you. You are finally beginning to live your own life. The path you are on now requires more than just passive agreement. It demands a rigorous, daily commitment to your own consciousness. You are no longer merely observing these concepts. You are integrating them into the architecture of your daily life. This is the point where the stakes change. Every interaction, every moment of solitude, and every internal doubt becomes a laboratory for your growth. You are building a space here that rejects the shallow metrics of social approval. This is not a collective for the comfortable. It is a community for those who are ready to dismantle the performance of their past. If you are still here, it is because you have stopped looking for a mirror and started looking for a map. You are choosing to see yourself with a clarity that most people spend their entire lives avoiding. This journey is not about finding a destination where you are finally enough. It is about realizing that you are always enough, and that the only thing standing in your way was the constant, exhausting need to prove it. Join us as we focus on the truth you hold when you are alone. The social impact of this internal shift is profound, and it manifests in ways you might not expect. People are naturally, almost gravitationally drawn to those who are not trying to impress them. Think about the last time you walked into a room where everyone was performing, vying for status, and adjusting their tone to fit the crowd. Now, imagine someone entering that same space who's entirely unmoved by the noise. She does not need to be the loudest voice or the most accommodating presence. She simply exists, anchored in her own reality. This creates a unique psychological safety. When you are around someone who is truly stable, you feel a sudden, sharp relief. You can finally drop your own performance. This is why this energy is so rare and so magnetic. You are no longer a mirror. You are a lighthouse. People will gravitate toward you because you are the only person in the room who has stopped asking for it. You become a sanctuary for the truth. This level of stability is a rare treasure precisely because it defies the standard social contract. Most of our interactions are built on a foundation of unspoken, fragile rules. We monitor our words, we calculate our reactions, and we constantly scan for signs of disapproval. This is the act of walking on eggshells, a state of hypervigilance that drains your cognitive resources and keeps your nervous system in a constant state of low-level alarm. When you encounter someone who has moved beyond this, the difference is immediate. You feel the silence in the room change. There is no hidden agenda, no demand for you to play a specific role to keep the peace, and no requirement for you to manage their emotional state. Most people are so accustomed to the friction of social maneuvering that they mistake this absence of tension for distance. It is not distance. It is the presence of a secure, unshakable center. You become the anchor that holds the room steady, proving that it is possible to exist without validation. We live in a culture that demands you be more beautiful, more successful, more accommodating, more visible. It is a relentless, high-speed treadmill that never stops to ask if you actually want to be running. You are taught from the moment you can understand language that your worth is a moving target, always just out of reach, waiting for the next milestone to validate your existence. Think about the sheer volume of energy you burn every single day just to maintain this image. You curate your life for an audience that is too busy curating their own to truly see you. This is the exhaustion of the race. It is a cycle of constant comparison, where you measure your internal reality against the polished, external highlights of strangers. You are told to optimize, to upgrade, and to perform, as if your life were a product to be marketed, rather than a journey to be experienced. But look at the cost. The anxiety of falling behind, the fear of being forgotten, and the hollow feeling that follows every temporary win. Stepping out of the race requires a level of courage that few are willing to cultivate. It is not a quiet transition. It is a collision with the expectations of everyone who benefited from your previous compliance. You must be prepared to be misunderstood. When you stop performing, people will label you as difficult, cold, or distant. They will project their own insecurities onto your silence, trying to force you back into the familiar role you once played. This is the moment of true psychological confrontation. You are standing in the gap between who you were and who you are becoming. Do not mistake this friction for a mistake. It is the sound of your old life breaking apart. To be misunderstood is the price of admission for a life defined by your own terms. It is the inevitable result of no longer being a mirror. You are changing your frequency, and in doing so, you are forcing everyone around you to rise or fall away. This is the radical act of choosing yourself. The exodus begins the moment you stop being useful to those who thrive on your insecurity. You will notice it first in the sudden, sharp tension in their voices when their familiar tactics fail to trigger your old responses. They are accustomed to a version of you that bends, apologizes, and over-explains to keep the peace. When that version disappears, they no longer have a place to anchor their control. Watch them closely. They will test your boundaries with increased intensity, trying to provoke the reaction they need to feel powerful again. They will use guilt, they will use silence, and they will use accusations of change to pull you back into the orbit of their needs. Do not engage. Every time you refuse to defend your existence, you accelerate their departure. This is not a loss. It is a clearing of the space you occupy. As they realize their influence over your self-worth has evaporated, they will inevitably turn away to find a more compliant host. Let the door close behind them. The silence that follows their exit is not empty. It is the sound of your own life returning to your hands. You are finally, undeniably, alone with your own integrity. You have become a mirror that reflects the truth, and not everyone is ready to see that. This is the most unsettling part of your transformation. When you stop playing the role of a buffer for others' egos, you force them to look at their own reality without the filter of your validation. You are no longer absorbing their projections or softening the edges of their mistakes. You simply exist as a clear, unyielding surface. When they look at you, they see their own inconsistencies, their own demands, and their own lack of integrity staring back at them. This is why they recoil. They do not want the truth. They want the comfort of a distorted image that makes them feel superior or secure. By refusing to be that distortion, you become a catalyst for their own crisis. You will see them struggle, shift, and eventually turn away, because the clarity you provide is too sharp for them to endure. Do not try to polish the glass to make it easier for them to look. The truth is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to be accurate. If they cannot handle the reflection, that is a limitation of their own vision, not a failure of your presence. You are not just changing your habits, you are changing your frequency. Think of your life as a signal that has been broadcasted to attract the approval of others. For years, you tuned that signal to match the expectations of your environment, constantly adjusting the volume to ensure you were heard, liked, and validated. Now, you are pulling the dial back toward yourself. This is the moment the static clears. You stop broadcasting for an audience and start listening to the signal of your own existence. This shift is a radical act of reclamation. You move from a state of, "I need you to see me," to the quiet, immovable truth of, "I see myself," and that is enough. It is a breakthrough of power that feels like gravity shifting beneath your feet. You no longer need to project your worth into the world to see if it lands. You hold it within your own center. When you stop asking the world to define your value, the world stops having the power to diminish it. You are finally operating on a frequency that only you can control. You are the architect of your own reality, standing in the clarity of a self that is finally, completely your own. This is the ultimate prize: emotional freedom. It is not a destination you reach, but a cage you dismantle, piece by piece. For years, you carried the heavy, invisible chains of other people's opinions, letting their judgments dictate the boundaries of your life. Every time you sought approval, you tightened those links. Now, you are cutting them. Feel the sudden, jarring lightness that follows the release. You are no longer tethered to the fluctuating moods of your peers or the shifting standards of your culture. You have stopped trading your identity for the cheap currency of validation. This freedom is sharp and cold, like winter air. It demands that you stand alone, without the crutch of external consensus to lean on. You realize that the chains were never locked. They were only held in place by your own fear of being misunderstood. By choosing to ignore the noise, you have shattered the mechanism of control. You are no longer a subject to the whims of the room. You are the sovereign of your own internal landscape, and the silence that remains is not empty. It is the sound of your own life, finally operating without interference. Now, strip away the room, strip away the social circles, the digital metrics, and the faces of those who once demanded your performance. Imagine yourself in a space where no one is watching, where no one can judge, and where no one can offer you a scrap of validation. You are alone in the dark. In this absolute silence, the noise of the world dies. The opinions you once feared become ghosts, drifting into nothingness. You are left with the only thing that remains when the lights go out: the truth of your own mind. This is the core of your existence. The opinion that truly shapes your life is not the one shouted in a crowd or whispered in a back room. It is the one you hold when you are entirely by yourself. If you can face that version of yourself without flinching, you have reached the summit of identity. Everything else is just static. You realize that your value does not require an audience to be verified. It exists in the dark. This is not a theory. It is the final, haunting realization that you are the only witness to your life that truly matters. You have arrived at the center of your own truth. Look at the world around you. Most people spend their entire existence hunting for acceptance. They are collectors of approval, measuring their worth by how many people nod in their direction. It is a frantic, exhausting race that never ends, because the finish line moves every time someone else changes their mind. But you have chosen a different path. You are not looking for a crowd to tell you that you are enough. You are doing something far more difficult and far more rare. You are choosing to understand yourself. This is not a passive state. It is an active, daily discipline. It requires you to look at your own flaws, your own triggers, and your own shadows without looking for someone else to fix them. Most people will never do this. They will stay in the safety of the herd. But you are walking away from that trade. You are the source of your own definition. You have reclaimed the power to define your own reality. That is a rare, quiet, and profound victory. This journey does not end with a single realization. It is a practice that deepens with every day you choose to remain authentic. You are building a new foundation, one where your self-worth is no longer up for negotiation. But you do not have to navigate this shift in isolation. There is a quiet strength in knowing that others are also stepping out of the performance. We are cultivating a space here for exactly that. A community of individuals who value depth over validation. If this path resonates with your own experience, consider subscribing to this channel. It is a simple, deliberate act. By joining us, you are signaling that you are ready to prioritize your own integrity above the noise of the world. Your presence here adds to the collective momentum. Every time you engage, you help create a signal that others can follow. The work of becoming who you truly are is never finished, but it is far easier when you walk alongside those who are doing the same. Now, let the noise of the world recede. You have spent years listening to the opinions of others, treating their voices as the final authority on your worth. But look at where you stand now. The silence you feel is not empty. It is the space where your own truth finally has room to breathe. When you stop asking for permission to exist, you stop the frantic movement of trying to be everything to everyone. You are left with the only thing that remains when the performance ends: yourself. Feel the weight of that. It is not a burden, but a foundation. It is the solid ground beneath your feet that does not shift when someone else is displeased. You have reclaimed the remote control of your own life. You are no longer a variable in someone else's equation. You are the constant. This is the radical act of choosing yourself, not as a temporary fix, but as a permanent state of being. Carry this stillness with you. When you walk into a room, you do not need to check the temperature or adjust your boundaries. You simply exist, fully and unapologetically. You have moved from a state of needing to be seen to the profound freedom of seeing yourself. That is enough. That has always been enough. Your journey is your own. And now, you are finally home.